Hi everyone, welcome to Tim's Final Confessions. I'm Tim Durling, and thank you for tuning in. I really thank you for tuning in these last few weeks. It's been crazy for everybody, and some of these episodes, it's pretty obvious that I've filmed a while ago, especially if there's more than one person in here. This one, you can tell I couldn't get to my I couldn't get to my regular hairdresser, so I did it myself. I couldn't stand it anymore. I'd put a mop on my head. But anyway, I hope everybody else out there is doing very, very well. I do have some new episodes coming up. I'm at this point waiting for a few things to come actually from Amazon. And I understand that there's priorities that don't include CDs and records. But for this episode, I'm going to go through my REO Speedwagon vinyl collection, a band one of the first, rock bands I ever liked when I was 10, 11 years old. And I'm missing a few, but not too many. And actually, even though I'm missing a few, some of the ones I have are more rare than the ones I'm missing, if that makes any sense. I just haven't come across the other ones yet. So we'll get started on this episode. The very first REO Speedwagon album came out all the way back in 1971. And for a long time, it was one of the rarest records I had. You don't see this one very much. And this is, it's actually a Canadian pressing. I would say it's a repressing, and there's a reason I say that. We'll look here in a second. I'm not supposed to be scratching my eye. That's a hard thing. But this is in really good shape. I found this at a record store in Enfield, Nova Scotia, about 25 years ago. 1995. Is that 25 years? Yeah. So, yeah, 25 years. Math is not my strength. And I was amazed. I'd never even seen it before, so I didn't even know what it looked like. And this, of course, is one of the early albums. That's Terry Luttrell, who's the singer on this album. Kevin Cronin had not joined the band at this point. Very, very different sounding band. This stuff would put you more in mind of the Doobie Brothers than it would. The REO Speedwagon would not be the first band that came to mind. If you played a track off this for, your average listener and go, tell me who this band is, you'd probably guess everybody but REO Speedwagon. And the reason I say it's a reprint is because if anybody knows anything about Epic pressings, the original Epic pressings, if you look at old Cheap Trick records and such in Boston, they've got an orange label on them, and this one has the 80s style with the blue label and Epic written that way. So this, at the very least, is a late 70s pressing, probably more likely early 80s when they started to become really popular. So like I said, Kevin Cronin not on that one, which is odd when you think he's like the singer and the primary songwriter for this band. He joined on the second album, REO 2, which came out in 1972. This is a Canadian copy, not in bad shape. And no hits on this one, but you can play songs on this and you'd say, well, it kind of sounds like REO Speedwagon. So they're starting to sound more like themselves, as funny as that sounds. And that's more of an original pressing, and I say that because of what the record itself looks like. So that is your standard Epic logo that would have been in the, I think, most of the 70s. I'm really not sure of before then. The third REO Speedwagon album was Riding the Storm Out, 1973. I have that on disc. I don't actually have it on vinyl. Someday. The next two are up with the first album. This is probably the rarest ones to find. This is from 1975, I guess. Let's get these ones mixed up. Just let me check. I'm sorry. I'm checking the dates here really quick. No, I got these in the wrong order. Sorry. Still rare. The next REO Speedwagon album came out in 1974. It's called Lost in a Dream. And they had, so starting with Riding the Storm Out, this guy, a guy named Mike Murphy, was the singer. Kevin Cronin left temporarily. I don't really like his vocals. If you listen to the original version of Riding the Storm Out, it's a great song. It's an REO classic, but I think most people are familiar with the live version with Kevin on vocals. This is another Canadian version on Epic with the old Epic logo there. And this is a very rare album. And again, it just came in a white paper sleeve, the copy I have anyway. And again, the same Epic label on this one. So the next one came out in 1975. and you can't really tell from looking at the front cover. It's called This Time We Mean It. And this is a US copy on, again, on Epic Records. This is the third and last one with Mike Murphy on vocals. And this is the first one I've got that actually has a sleeve with it that has personalized graphics on it and album credits. And what's interesting about this album is that they do a song called Out of Control. And if you look, the songwriting credits, it says Glenn Frey, Don Henley. That's an Eagles tune. And it was on their Desperado album. And it was never a single. So REO Speedwagon ended up doing it, which is, you don't hear about that very often. And again, it's got the same Epic label on it. Kevin Cronin rejoined for their next album, which came out in '76, which is simply titled REO. It's also known as the Cow album because it's just the side of a cow hide on it, and it's just REO. And that one is the first one that really started to sound like the band that most people would recognize as REO Speedwagon. Keep Pushing came off that one. That was a great song. Actually, oddly enough, and this is very 70s, where the first big album for them was a live album. That's very, very typical of the 70s. About the only time that happened. 1977, Live, You Get What You Play For. This is a Canadian version on Epic, and of course it's got some ringware on it. You can tell that it's Canadian because it's got English and French here on it. And this is where a lot of these older songs, like Riding the Storm Out, like 157 Riverside Avenue, Keep Pushing, Son of a Poor Man, this is really where the versions most people know of those old songs, they know these versions. Photo of the band, it's a gatefold, some credits, and I'll just dig out one of these records. Same old Epic label on here. So back, it's different. Back in the 70s, record labels allowed bands to not sell a great deal of albums as long as it was just a steady climb. They made just enough to make money on the road, and the record company wasn't out too much money. But they allowed these bands to develop, because here we are, a band 6-7 albums deep into their career. No gold album, no top 40 singles. This is unheard of these days, but REO Speedwagon is a classic example of a band that ended up making the record label quite a bit of money because they were patient. 1978, this is really one of the first REO Speedwagon albums you see at any amount of all used. You could tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. Best dad joke ever to make a rock album title. I love it, makes me laugh. Tune a fish there with a tuning fork coming out of its mouth. 1978, this is a Canadian copy on Epic. Two songs on here, still get a lot of classic rock airplay, Roll With the Changes and Time For Me To Fly. Neither of them hit the top 40, but kind of like Journey's Wheel in the Sky, a lot of airplay. A lot of people know them, even though they weren't top 40 singles. And this one, I don't know if it's a reissue or not, but it has the more recognizable 80s Epic label on it. And I know the CD has all the lyrics and credits, so this is probably not the original sleeve. Ending off the 70s, 1979, they put out this album, 9 Lives. And again, a Canadian issue on Epic. Best known song off here is probably actually one that Kevin doesn't sing, sung by bassist Bruce Hall, Back on the Road Again. It wasn't as successful as You Can Tune a Piano, but it wasn't unsuccessful either. So there you go. And again, that's what the Epic label looked like on this one. So they'd made a little bit of inroads. Epic put out this pretty substantial best of or anthology in 1980, A Decade of Rock and Roll, 1970 to 1980. This is a Canadian copy in really good shape on Epic. And this is a summation of their career as of yet. And it was probably the first time a lot of fans heard some of the stuff off the very, very first few REO Speedwagon albums. It's a gatefold with plenty of pictures from up till, the career as it was. I'll show you what one of the records looks like. Very familiar Epic label. Next up, of course, the big one, the one, if anybody had one REO Speedwagon album, you see this one a lot. High Infidelity, also 1980. This was the game changer for them. This contained Keep On Loving You and Take It On the Run. Multi-platinum album. I don't think it's diamond. I don't think it's a diamond album, but it's something like 7-8 million sold in the States alone. This was a runaway success for them. Hardly an overnight sensation, but the patience paid off. This is where the patience paid off for Epic Records. They sold a lot of albums with this one here. And this is a Canadian copy. This one's pretty easy to find, although it's harder to find one in good shape because it was such a popular record. And the familiar Epic label on here, I think from here on in. 1982, the band themselves thinks this album was rushed and it wasn't as good. I actually think it's at least of equal quality to High Infidelity, is Good Trouble. And this is a Canadian edition on Epic. Keep the Fire Burning was a top 10 song off of this one. This one's got a nice hard cardboard sleeve. These are the ones that last. So, band photos and lyrics, and a personalized label for the first time because they were coming off a very successful album. It's got probably a latch on here, kind of cool looking. 1984, another big album for them. This is Wheels Are Turnin'. And this is a Canadian copy on Epic. This one went multi-platinum because it contained Can't Fight This Feeling, which is the #1 song. It also had One Lonely Night, Live Every Moment, and I Don't Want to Know. There were 4 top 40 singles off of this one. It matched High Infidelity for that. And like I said, this is a Canadian edition. So we've got lyrics on one side, and the other side's kind of interesting. It's got credits, and it's got this stroboscope. So it says, to view the stroboscopic wheel, trim around outer edge and cut out slots, pierce center with a needle or pin, hold center pin and spin disc with picture side facing a mirror, view moving images through the rotating slots. Did anyone actually do this? I've seen copies of this used. No one cut this out. So I'm wondering what it actually looked like. Was it like a kaleidoscope, or? I'm not familiar with stroboscope. So now we're back to just your standard Epic label on this one, even though this turned out to be a pretty big album. And I got one more to show you here. 1987. Life as We Know It. This was a gold album. It wasn't platinum. It wasn't quite as successful. It contained hits That Ain't Love and In My Dreams. They were both top 20 singles. This is a Canadian copy, again on Epic. And this was the last one that guitarist Gary Richrath played on, who's sadly no longer with us, but he left and was out of the band for a long time. Lyrics on one side and credits on the other. And this one has a standard Epic label on it. So I know there's at least 2 that came out after that. 88, they put out the hits, and then in 1990, The Earth, A Small Man, His Dog, and a Chicken. I'm not making that up. Good album. Those are on vinyl. I don't know if there's any REO vinyl after that, other than reissues, of course. So I'm curious if there's any REO Speedwagon fans out there. What have you got? What have you got for some cool stuff? You notice I didn't have any singles. I'm kind of surprised I haven't come across any singles in my travels. But speaking of singles, next I got an episode coming up that talks about just that. So stay safe out there, everybody, and thank you for watching Tim's Final Confessions.